All right, good evening, everyone. It is good to be back at BBI this evening. We have not been able to do any hymnology for the last 2 weeks, so we're going to pick back up and study a song that I hope everybody knows. If you don't, it'll be a good one to add to your repertoire. It's page 323 in your church hymnal, and it's the song, I Love to Tell the Story. The evangelical emphasis or movement that really began in England was started from the great preachings of men like George Whitefield and John and Charles Wesley. The movement in its earliest days reached mainly the lower and middle classes of society, with the upper classes remaining quite aloof from its influence. During the 19th century, however, the evangelical movement began to have considerable influence upon the upper classes as well. One such influential group was known as the Clapham sect, because the activities of this group centered in the elite suburb of Clapham in southwest London. These men were wealthy evangelical philanthropists, students of the Bible, and men of prayer. They gave freely of their time, talents, and money to spread the gospel. And though these individuals generally maintained their membership within the Anglican Church, their emphasis was always on the necessity of personal conversion and guidance by the Holy Spirit, rather than on a mere reliance upon the sacraments and rituals of the Church. There are numerous examples of the zealous ministries carried on by these influential Christian laymen, including a number of members of Parliament who exercised great compassion upon the masses of impoverished people throughout the United Kingdom. A noted historian says of this Clapham sect, never in the history of Anglicanism had any group exercised so profound an influence. Catherine Hankey was born in 1834. She was the daughter of a wealthy English banker. Though the members of her family were prominent members of the Anglican Church, they were always associated with its more evangelical faction. Her father was one of the influential members of the Clapham sect. Early in life, Catherine, or Kate as she was known, caught this same evangelical concern from her father. She began organizing Sunday school classes for rich and poor throughout London. These classes had a profound influence throughout the city, with a large number of young students in turn becoming zealous Christian workers. Kate also did considerable writing, including such works as Bible Class Teachings, which was a booklet on confirmation, as well as a number of books of verse. All of the royalties received from these publications were always directed to some foreign mission project. When Catherine was only 13 years of age, 30 years of age. Whew, I'll be there in 3 weeks. Good night. 30 years of age, she experienced a serious illness. I can see that. During a long period of recovery, she wrote a lengthy poem on the life of Christ. The poem consisted of 2 main sections, each containing 50 verses. The first section of the poem was entitled, The Story Wanted. It was from this part of her poem that she later adapted the words for another of her familiar hymn texts, Tell Me the Old, Old Story. This hymn has since become another of the church's classic children's hymns. Later that same year, while still recovering from her illness, Kate Hankey completed the second part of her poem on the life of Christ. This sequel to the first section was entitled, The Story Told. From these verses came the text, For I Love to Tell the Story, which was written in the same meter, but with a different accent than her other familiar hymn texts. Being musically inclined, Kate also composed her own tunes for these 2 texts. Her hymns received little notice, however, when used with this music. The following year, in 1867, a large international YMCA convention was held in Montreal, Canada. Did you know that used to be the YMCA was actually a Christian organization? Hence the Young Men's Christian Association. Not so much anymore. One of the speakers at the convention, Major General Russell from England, closed his emotionally charged message to the delegates by quoting the verses from Miss Hankey's 2 hymn texts. In the audience that day was a noted American gospel musician, William H. Doane, which we see his name a lot through our hymn books. And he actually composed more than 2,000 gospel songs. Mr. Doane was greatly moved by these lines and promptly composed musical settings for both texts. Later, A new musical setting, which replaced Doan's music for I Love to Tell the Story, was composed by William G. Fisher, a Philadelphia musician and piano dealer, which is the tune that we sing in our hymn today. Fisher also added the refrain for the hymn, I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old, old story of Jesus and his love. In 1875, the hymn appeared in its present form in Bliss and Sankey's collection, Gospel Hymns and Sacred Songs, which brought I Love to Tell the Story to the attention of evangelical congregations everywhere. Both of Catherine Hankey's hymns are still widely used today. Let's sing I Love to Tell the Story. Mom, would you jump on the piano, please? All 4 verses. And we'll do it in the key of G. How's that sound? It's written in G, so it makes it easier that way. I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old, old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story, more wonderful it seems than all the golden fancies of all our golden dreams. I love to tell the story. It is so much for me, and that is just the reason I tell it now to thee. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old, old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story. 'Tis pleasant So tonight we're going to continue looking at rhythm, meter, and things like that. Tonight we're going to look at dots, slurs, and ties. We're going to look at dots so that we understand how they add value to the notes. Then we're going to look at slurs and ties and understanding the difference, because they can be confusing if you're not sure of the difference. So first of all, let's look at dots. Now, adding a dot to any given note adds half of that note's value onto it. For example, a dotted quarter note would be worth 1.5 beats if you're in a time signature that's over 4, like a 3/4, 4/4, 2/4, etc. As long as it's an over 4 time signature, it's worth 1.5 beats. But a dotted half note, in example like a 4/4 or a 3/4 time signature, it would be worth 3 beats. Now, trivia question, not trick question, but how come you cannot have a dotted quarter note in a 2/4 time signature song? Because that's more than one measure. How many beats would be in a 2/4 time signature measure? 2 beats per measure. How much would a dotted half note be worth? So 3 can't fit into 2, so you can't have that. If you see that, it's an error. So a dotted half note would be worth 3 beats, which is the same as 1 half note and 1 quarter note. So look at the example that I wrote out for you there. You're very rarely ever going to see a dotted whole note, but I threw it out there because it's easier to understand. When you have a dotted whole note, you take the whole note, which is worth 4, and then you add half of its value onto the side of it. So half of 4 is 2. So now you're talking about 6 beats. So instead of writing it out, you just have and a dot. That way you know you've got 6 beats, okay? Dotted half note, you know a half note is worth 2, and you add half the value of it, which would be 1, so now a dotted half note is worth 3. And when you have a dotted quarter note is worth 1. Half of 1 is a half, or an eighth note in other words. So it's really 1.5, or a quarter and an eighth note that's been together, okay? So we'll look more into that in a minute. But look at number 2, talking about slurs. A slur is a curved line that connects 2 or more notes of different pitches. This is the key difference. A slur connects 2 or more notes of different pitches together. It does not combine the value of the note. For example, if you have look in the first example there, we have 2 quarter notes that have been slurred together. They've been lassoed together, if you will. That doesn't combine the value. It just means that, look at what I wrote there in the C subpoint. This indicates the notes are to be played or sung smoothly with no space in between. For example, if the slurs weren't in that example that I gave you there, it would be like going ah 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 ah. But if they're slurred, you'd go ah. It's more smooth. They're kind of smeared together. They're not distinct and different, okay? You are changing pitches, but you're making it flow rather than individual tones, okay? Now that's very different from a tie. It looks very similar. If you're not careful, you get them confused. But the way to know is that a slur connects notes of different pitches. A tie connects notes of the same pitch. That's why I put that in bold, so you can always remember that. And what a tie does is it combines the value of that note. So, a whole note tied together with a whole note is how many beats? 8. And you would hold that. You would not play that second half note. You would just hold them out for 8. It's the same thing as yoking up 2 oxen. You know I've got 2 oxen working as one, so you can pull more weight and go further. So look in the third measure there. We've tied a quarter note into the next measure with a half note there. Notice they're on the same line. They're both G's. But how many beats are we going to give that? You've got a quarter note and a half note that have been tied together. So now we have 3 beats. That's exactly right. And then of course you've got, in the last 2 measures, you have a quarter note and a whole note that have been tied, well, you're looking at it like this, a quarter note and a whole note that have been tied together. So now we have a value of 5 beats, and it's lassoed together to where it all gets shared, okay? Turn the page if you would. There's your homework assignment. It actually probably should have been put towards the end of your stack, but who's counting, right? Whatever. You can put that wherever you want it. Maybe that's why the Ford girls kept trying to rearrange their music and I didn't know. Oh boy, we'll get to that in a minute. Alright, so your first worksheet is on the dotted quarter notes. So, what I want you to do is go through exercise 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this worksheet. You've got a review and an explanation of what dotted quarter notes are at the top. Just remember, a dot, no matter what it's attached to, automatically adds half of that preceding note's value. So if it's a quarter note, that being worth 1, you got a dot, it's a half. Or as we learned previously, and. That's how we read it. If it's a half with a dot, we know that it's 1, 2, and now it's 3. And if it's, in a very rare occasion, whole note, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and in a 4/4 time signature, it would be 1. You know, that's why it's very rare to see that, because you're not going to find a 5/4 very often, although there's some out there. It's very, very rare. Actually, it would be 6, wouldn't it? I'm so excited about this, I can't even do it right. In a 6/4 time signature. Is that the only time you'll ever see that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't even know why I'm trying. That's terrible. Maybe I should have had supper before I came. It'd help a little bit. But now here's one that I didn't put on there yet that you will learn, and you'll need to learn, and it's the dotted eighth note. Most of the time a dotted eighth note is going to be followed by a 16th note. Because if this is worth an eighth note, that dot, which is half of an eighth note, would be the same thing as a 16th. So technically, if you're looking just at this, at the dotted eighth note, followed by 16th note, just wild guess, how much do you think that's worth?
Quarter note.
Same thing as a quarter note. Because you've got a half here, and you've got these two here combined make a half. Which equals 1, which is a quarter note. Okay? That right there is kind of irrelevant to our lesson today, except for the fact that it involves a dot. But that's not part of the exercises that you're learning today. So look at that first worksheet. Go ahead and get started on it. The dotted quarter notes. So a dotted quarter note is equal to 1.5. Notice in the example how it counts it out. You've got the dotted quarter note, which would be the same thing as counting 1, 2, and then on the and of 2 is when you hit your eighth note, when they're tied together like that. So let me draw it up here while you're looking at your sheet. You've got a dotted quarter note followed by an eighth note. It will be counted out as, if you're doing your ones, 1 and 2 and, if you're doing your ands. So it would clap like this. 1 and 2 and. Then we go into your 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? So when you have the dot, you go ahead and begin the next beat, but the back half of the beat is where this comes into play. So that's why you're going to give this one 1, 2, and then you're going to give this the and. So 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Okay? So go ahead and work on your worksheet there. We'll clap the rhythm after you've done 2, 3, 4, and 5. So don't worry about number 1 yet. So number 2, write the counts below the notes indicated, and then we'll clap that after everybody's done. It doesn't have the right amount of blanks I noticed earlier today, so you can just write it in.
Aside the first one.
Okay.
3/4.
Yep. So in number 2, the first measure, let me wipe this off. And I'll show you how it's done, especially since that blank is missing. Okay, so you have a quarter note, dot, eighth note, and a quarter note, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the way this would be counted in 3/4, mind you, would be 1 and 2 and 3. Okay? That's how you would do that. But it doesn't have the extra space there for you to do that properly, so you just have to write that in the blank next to it. But anytime you're looking at dots on quarter notes, you're going to have to remember to add that "and" in there in order for you to be able to rightly put that out there. But that's what the first measure of exercise number 2, line number 2, that's what it should look like. 1 and 2 and 3. So it's 1 and 2 and 3. Okay? Then use your "ands" as you go through the next part of the rest of that exercise there. And go ahead and help yourself to number 3, 4, and 5 as you move along. Just raise your hand if you have any questions or need any help as you stumble, more than likely, like I would, through this exercise, because these "ands" really throw it off. Pay attention to number 4. It says some dotted quarter notes are missing dots behind the quarter note. Doesn't mean they all are. Hence the word some. Pay attention. And number 5 should be the most exciting, to add in the missing bar lines. When you're finished with that worksheet, you can simply put your pencil down and look up to the front. That way I know you're finished. Give you about 20 seconds to wrap that one up, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, everybody look at number 1. We're going to clap this first, break it down measure by measure, and then we'll try to go through the whole thing. So the first measure of number 1 we'll count as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? You see where you're supposed to clap? You clap on 1, on the and after 2, and then on 3 and 4. So again, the first measure is going to go like this. Try it with me if you want to. If you're not comfortable or confident yet, you can just listen one more time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? It's very simple. Just clap on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The only and you're clapping on is the one after 2 because of that dotted quarter note. So let's clap measure number 1 together. Ready? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? Measure number 2. You have rests. You're not going to clap at all until the and on the back side of 2. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You're holding that 3 and 4 and. So that's why I keep my hands together. So again, it goes like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? Try that second measure with me. Ready? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. One more time. You're only clapping on the and after 2. Watch your music. Don't watch me. You're watching your music. Count with me. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You'll get it. Measure number 3. This is going to be extra tricky because you're going to clap on 1 and then you're clapping on 3. So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You see that? You clap on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You're resting on the and after the 4. So try measure 3 with me. Ready? This is our tempo. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Good job. Measure 4. This is what it's going to sound like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay? Try it with me. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Very good. Okay, number 2. You're supposed to write down the count below the notes indicated and then clap the rhythm while counting the beats out loud. Who wants to go first? Okay, fine. We won't. So, I don't have mine written in because I have the master copy, so correct me if I'm wrong. It should be, like we wrote up here, 1 and 2, and then your and should be under the 8th note, and 3 should be under the quarter note. Then the second measure, it should be 1 and 2. Each of those go underneath those 8th notes, and then it should be 3 and underneath your quarter note, right? Is that right?
And 3.
1 and 2 and 3 and. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, so the dotted quarter note should read and 3 and. 1 and 2, and then the quarter note, dotted quarter note should be and 3 and. You got to count for those ands.
The 2 ands together?
Yes, on the front side of the 3 and the back side of the 3. Simply because those 8th notes can only be worth and or a half each. So you've got the first 8th note would be 1, the second 8th note would be and, then the third 8th note would be 2, then you've got and 3 and left in the measure. So that all goes with that dotted quarter note. Okay? Alright, third measure of line 2. Quarter note, 1. Quarter rest, 2. Then you have the 8th rest, which would be 3, and the 8th note would be and. So it should read 1, 2, 3 and. That's what you should have. Everybody get that? That's why I tell you to bring a pencil, just in case. Last measure should be 1 under the 8th and under the 8th, 2 under the 8th rest, and it should be and 3 and, just like the second measure. The only difference is it's an 8th rest instead of an 8th note. It's the exact same meter, okay? Alright, number 3. Write the count below the notes indicated, then clap the rhythm while counting the beats out loud. Oh, we didn't clap number 2, did we? All right, let's clap number 2. Ready? We'll just go all the way through it and see how it happens. Now this is 3/4, so it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Okay, here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. Okay. It's hard to go from 4/4 to 3/4. All right, let's see if I can do it in my head. No, that's not right either. All right, number 3. Write the count down and below the notes that are indicated, and clap the rhythm while counting the beats out loud. So you should have written this. Now this is 4/4. So you should have written it as follows. It should be 1. The next 8th note should be and then the quarter note should be 2. The dotted quarter note should be 3 and then that, no.
3 and 4.
Yes, right, that's right. It should be 3 and 4, and then that 8th note should be and. If I had a writing utensil, this would all come so much easier. So it should be 1 and 2, 3, 4 and. That's how it would go. No, wait. 1 and 2, 3, 4 and. That's what it would be. Okay, second measure. It should read as 1, 2, or if you did your ands, it would be 1 and 2, and then the and off of 2 would come underneath that 8th note, so it should read 1, 2, and then your next quarter note would be 3, and then you would have another quarter note with 4. So it would go 1, 2, and 3, 4. Okay? Third measure, quarter note 1, quarter note 2, dotted quarter note 3, 4, and then your 8th rest should be and. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Okay? Everybody caught up? Fourth measure should be 1 and 2, 3, under that dotted quarter note should be 2, 3. Then you have an 8th note which should be and then under your last quarter note should be 4. So it's 1 and 2, 3, 4, and, no.
And 4.
1 and 2 and 3. No, that's not it either.
And 2 and 3 and 4.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Is that right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Whew, so much pressure being up front. Okay, so number 4, some dotted quarter notes are missing dots behind the quarter note. We're going to add the missing dots. First measure should be very simple. Both quarter notes get dots. It's easy. That makes 4 beats. You got 1 1/2 and a half, that makes 2. 1 1/2 and a half, that makes 2. So you got 2 and 2. It's 4. Second measure. You can choose, but I would obviously put it on the second quarter note. The dot should go on the second quarter note. So there should not be a dot on that first quarter note. Because 2 8th notes together make 1 beat. Then you have a quarter note. Then if you have a dotted quarter note, you add that 8th note into it, and that gives you 2. So that's 2 and 2, 4. We're good. Third measure. You should not have a dot in that measure. At all. Because you have 2 from the half note, and you've got 2 8th notes in that measure. That makes 1, and that quarter note makes 1. So you've got 2, 1, and 1, which makes 4. So there's no dot in that third measure. And then the last measure, the only quarter note in that measure, gets a dot. Okay? Alright, number 5. The bar lines are missing from the following example. Add the missing bar lines. Y'all gonna have to tell me because I can't do this fast enough to, we gotta move on anyway. So, now remember this is in 2/4, not 4/4, so there's only, how many beats per measure? 2 beats, so it should be 1 and 2 and. That's how you're gonna count this one. So it's 1 and 2, bar line. So it should be quarter note, 8th rest, 8th note, bar line. Okay? Then it should be 8th note, quarter note, bar line. Dotted quarter note, 8th rest, bar line. 8th rest, 8th note, quarter note, bar line. Dotted quarter note, 8th note, bar line. 8th note, dotted quarter note, bar line. And then the rest is finished. Okay? Next page, slurs and ties. Slur is that curved line that connects two or more notes that are on different pitches. Slur just simply means that you would play or sing these notes as smoothly as possible with no space in between. Take your church hymnal, turn to page 134. The song, I'll Have a New Life. I'll have a new body. That's that one, okay?
What page?
134, I'll Have a New Life. I'm going to show you an example. This song actually has both. Easy teaching this way. Look on the second line at the end at the word life. You have a half note and a quarter note that's tied together. That's a tie because they're on the same pitch, same line. Sopranos are a D, altos are a G, tenors are a B. And of course your altos are going eternal, okay? But now skip down to the fourth line of the song at the very end at the word life again. Notice the soprano line is a C that is tied together. But look at life for the altos. That is a slur, my friends, because it goes from an E up to a G. They're not on the same line or space. It's a slur. So you have a tie for the sopranos and for the bass, but the alto and tenor line, life, oh yes. Okay, so it's, instead of going life, oh yes, it's life, oh yes. So you're slurring it together. Life, instead of life, you're slurring it together. Okay? So that's an example of a slur and a tie. Now turn to 205. 205. Wonderful words of life. Beautiful words, wonderful words of life. This contains both slurs and ties as well. At the end of the first line at the word life, I don't know what it is about the word life, but these songs work out well together like that. The note of the G going down to the D on the soprano line, notice because they're on two different pitches, that is a slur, because you're going life, okay? But the alto line, they're both B's. Same space, same ledger space. It's under the middle C ledger line, so it's a B. They're tied together, so it's the same. That's the difference between a tie and a slur. On the bass line, same point, those are tied. But now look down at the very bottom, at the end of the chorus, under the first ending there, that bracket with the 1 in it, that's the first ending. Notice that the soprano line goes up 3 notes, but they're connected. That's a slur. You're going like this. Life. Instead of going life. We don't sing it that way, we go life. They're slurred together. And the same thing for the alto line, you're going from that D to that G. That's a slur. But look at the bass and the tenor. Those bad boys are tied. That's not a slur. They're tied, which means you combine their numerical value together. And you sing out, you hold it. You don't go life. You don't do that. You life. You just connect them together, okay? All right. Now, your worksheet on slurs and ties. Slurs, curved lines that connects 2 or more different pitches. Tie is a curved line that connects 2 notes of the same pitch, and you combine their values together, okay? So there's your examples. Look at number 1. Add that together for me. If I tied a half note and a quarter note together, I would have 3 beats. That's exactly right. If I tied a half note and an 8th note together, I would have 2 and 1/2 beats. If I were to tie a whole note and a quarter note together, I would have 5 beats. If I tied, alright, now we're working on dots now. Dots and ties in this lesson. If I have a dotted half note, what's a dotted half note worth? Right?
Half of the...
You take a half note and it's worth how many?
2.
And then the dot adds half of 2, which is
1.
So it's worth 3. So you've got 3, and now you've tied it in with a quarter note, which is worth how many?
1.
So you have a value of 4. All right, finish exercise 1. Don't go to exercise 2, though. Finish 1 and then look at me. We'll do 2 together. I have some smoke rolling out of ears if we try to do that one on your own. Okay, you good? All right. So when you tie two whole notes together, you have 8. When you take 2 eighth notes together, that equals 1, because an eighth note is worth how much? Half. So 2 halves come together to make 1. When you tie 2 half notes together, it makes 4. And when you take an eighth note and a quarter note together, it makes 1 and a half. It's the same thing as a dotted quarter note. So number 2, what we're going to do now is we're going to write the note that these are equal to. You can have a quarter note and a dotted half note, or it's the same thing as something that gets 4 beats. Which note gets 4 beats? Whole note. So that's your answer for the first one. When you tie them together, it's the same thing as a whole note. Second one, when you tie 2 quarter notes together, that equals how many beats? Tell me. How many beats? 2. Which note gets 2 beats? A half note. When you tie a dotted quarter note and an eighth note, how much is a dotted quarter note worth? 1 and a half. How much is an eighth note worth? A half. So if you take 1 and a half and add a half, how many do you have? What note is worth 2? Half note. Then last of all, take a half note and a quarter note, tie them together. It's the same thing as a dotted, somebody besides Jason say it, dotted, a dotted half note. Thank you very much. It's the same thing as a dotted half note. Exact same thing. Okay, exercise 3. Draw circles around the ties, draw squares around the slurs. Do that. Circles around the ties, squares around the slurs. If you can't remember the difference, look at the top or look at what I gave you in your opening outline in bold. One of them is only different pitches, the other one is only on same pitches.
Don't get mixed up in there.
Yeah, don't get mixed up.
No, that's a double there.
Number 4 is the exact same thing. Circles around the ties, squares around the slurs. Go ahead and do both. But be careful. It's tricky. Isn't this more fun than electrical engineering? Maybe not. I guess it depends on who you ask. I got 3 men on the front row that's going, I don't know, I enjoy it pretty good. Okay, let's look at number 3. The first one you come to is a tie, which means you should have circled it. Then you should come to a
What do you mean the first one?
the first arch that you have there.
Oh, whoa. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was adding the front one onto it, not the.
No, don't do that.
I forgot about the mark.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so the next arch or line that we come to that connects is a. Why is it a slur? Because the notes are on different pitches. You're exactly right. That should have merited a square, rectangle, quadrilateral, whatever you got. Next one you come to should be in the 1, 2, 3, 4th measure, and that is a circle because it's tied. The next one you come to is a circle because they're tied. And the next one you come to should be square because it's a slur, and last of all, they're tied. It's a circle. Number 4, in the first measure, you have 3 notes that are slurred because they're different pitches, so that should have been a circle. I mean square. Square. Sorry. The next one you come to, they are, so you put a circle. The next, very next one, tied again, so you circle that. And the next one is a tie again, so it should be a circle. And then the next one is a square, because it's a slur. And then the last should have 2. What do you have?
Square and a circle.
Square, and then the last 2 should be circled. So you have a square over the 3 and a circle over the last 2. Very good. Fantastic.
How about that?
Okay, so you have two worksheets of It All Adds Up. You're very familiar with this crab worksheet here with the guy walking around. Yeah? Same principle applies. Add the notes up. Do the bonus question at the bottom for an extra 5 points I'll give you. Let's do the first one together just to make sure you know what you're doing. A half note plus a half note equals how many beats? 4 beats. Very good. You need to complete that worksheet. Go to your second worksheet. The very first one, you have a quarter note and an eighth note. That's equal to how many beats? 1.5. So put that down, 1.5, okay?
Which one is that?
The second worksheet, the very first one.
Oh, it's that
Yep.
worksheet.
That's equal to 1.5. Alright? Do those two worksheets. You have 10 minutes of class time left. Let me say this also. Some of you have already done grace greater than our sin. But I've been saving it for this lesson because it has dotted quarter notes in it. Your homework assignment is, first of all, to finish any of the worksheets you didn't complete. You will turn in It All Adds Up, both of them. But you also will turn in grace greater than our sin, and I want you to write in the beats as they apply to the soprano line in this song, okay? Just the soprano line because they're different in the chorus, okay? So, for example, first measure of Marvelous Grace is a dotted quarter note, like this right here, and it's in 3/4 time, a dotted quarter note, an eighth note, and a quarter note. So your first line should look just like this. 1 and 2 and 3, okay? And that's what I want you to do for the entire song, for the first verse and the chorus on the soprano line. So in the chorus you have some dotted half notes, which are worth how many beats? How many beats is a dotted half note worth? 3. So you should write underneath those dotted half notes, or above them if you have to, 1, 2, 3. Okay?
Do we have a song?
I gave it to you about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. You might have put it in lesson 6 of last session, maybe? And also, this has nothing to do with the class other than a little bit of something for you to use at your church. I gave you this 7 habits for good choir members. Be something good for you to keep for yourself. If you're a choir leader, pass that out to your choir. There's a little bonus in there that Brother Byron Fox greatly believes that you should give your choir director a small gift like homemade cookies. Try to encourage him. I didn't write that. If it was me, I'd have asked for a gift card to Chick-fil-A or the Cookout or something like that. But he likes cookies. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. But that's something for you to have. If you're not the choir leader at your church, maybe you could pass that to your choir leader and let them use that at their discretion, okay? All right, remainder of class, go through your It All Adds Up worksheets and whatever else you need to finish your homework for that. I will let you know when class time is up. Raise your hand if you need help. If you have homework to turn in, you may pass it forward. I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and cut the recording right now. So, Nebraska, thank you for tuning in. I know this has been kind of rushed and fast, you know, but if you have any questions, see Brother Jason. And maybe he can email me, or Brother Craig can email me or something like that, okay? And we'll try to get it all ironed out, all right? Thank you very much. God bless you.